Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Guru panel on programmability. I'm John Wagnon. I'm a Dev Central solution developer, and I'm joined today with the Guru panel themselves. You can call him Superman. I call him Colin Walker. So Colin, good to have you here. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, man. So I'm Colin Walker. I've done these things once or twice before. I've been at F5 for just about 10 years now. Did the Dev Central thing for a really long time, so I'm all over the community and videos and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
My focus has been programming and anything that has to do with iRules, iControl, iApps, all that kind of stuff, and specifically dealing with the community with all of those things and trying to help play an interface between the community and our product development team to try and make sure that we're staying on track to meet the user's needs.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so Colin does a lot of great work on Dev Central, and so yeah, I appreciate you being here. We also have with us Kevin Stewart out of the East Coast, and one quick thing that I'll say about Kevin before he introduces himself is, you guys probably know this on Dev Central, we have what's called Dev Points. So if you post a question or you answer a question or you participate or contribute to Dev Central, you get a Dev Point. And most things that you do, you get one Dev Point. So it takes a lot of time to build up a lot of Dev Points. Well, Kevin, in just the last few months, had just passed the 10,000 Dev Point mark. So I just want to say congratulations to Kevin, and I appreciate his contribution. And I think the second place guy is, I don't even think he can see Kevin in the distance, kind of thing, in terms of Dev Points. So chances are real good that if you're on right now watching this Guru panel, Kevin has helped you out at least once, probably a lot of times. So anyway, so with that, Kevin, thanks for your contributions, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, thank you. So my name is Kevin Stewart. I'm a systems engineer out of the East Coast. I bring a little bit of different perspective to the audience here. I mean, to the crowd here, yeah. Because not just I'm a field systems engineer, so I work with customers on a day-to-day basis, but I'm also a federal field systems engineer, which if you're familiar at all with the federal government, they have some pretty unusual requirements. So hopefully I can help out a lot in the panel.
Yeah,
nice.
That's some great perspective, and you're right, the federal government's a little different animal sometimes, so it'll be good to hear your perspective. And then finally we have Nojan Moshiri here, and so Nojan, maybe introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, hi, so I've been at F5 about 6 years. I've really done a number of different roles here at F5, from solution engineering to solution architecture, and as of the last year I've been focused on programmability. So all of the discussion topics that we have planned for today, and I'm the product manager for all of our programmability tools.
Awesome. Yeah, so it's great to have everybody here. I would just say to all the viewers out there, use the chat session that's available online right now. We'll continue to take questions. We've already had several questions posted on Dev Central, and so we'll go through those. We'll try to get to all the questions that we can. Those that we can't, I think Colin may post a blog later with all the unanswered questions to make sure we get all the questions answered. So, so now that we've kind of got the intros out of the way, Nojan, we'll turn it back over to you to kind of give the story of the programmability.
Yeah, we'll set the stage a little bit.
Sure, yeah, go right ahead.
So just have a few slides here. This is only going to take a few minutes, so don't worry, we'll jump into the questions really quickly. So I don't have to tell you guys that programmability is a real key feature of F5's product line. And when we talk about programmability, what we're trying to do at F5 is really shift the focus to start thinking about really the life cycle of programmability from beginning to end. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, why programmability, right? The data is coming out. I mean, as anyone that's been in system administration or network administration for any length of time can tell you, that when we automate and we write tools, our productivity goes up. But we haven't really studied that. And so I was a system administrator for 10 plus years. It was always a fight with the business to get time, money, and space to actually do that. And now we're seeing that data. So this study from Redwood Software that just came out last year on they call it manual madness. We're seeing 70% of businesses that they studied, and this was a large group, over 1,000 employees at over 300 companies, both in the US and in the UK. 70% of these businesses reported increased productivity because of automation. So we have data from Puppet Labs, we have data from our own customers. So it's not a question anymore of whether to automate, but how much gain can you get from programmability and automation. So let's go to the next slide. And when I was talking about the life cycle, when it comes to F5, we're looking at the entire set of tasks that it takes to actually run the F5 product line. So from provisioning devices, we'll talk a little bit about that. That's actually provisioning either F5 hardware or software. From provisioning services, so these are applications or other policies on the box, tuning those services, managing health and support, working with the support, and then logging and analyzing. All of these tasks can be programmed and automated, and it's all designed to decrease cost, increase productivity, and reduce complexity. So let's look at the next slide and drill down into some of the topics we're going to be talking about today. And I know most of you here at this panel, if you're attending, I'm sure you've worked with some aspect of this. But just to set the stage, when we talk about our programmability functionality, there's a whole hodgepodge of tools that we have. And what we're going to be doing in the next year is putting this life cycle story around it for you all. We're going to be really focusing on showing you examples of how you can manage the entire set of tools. So of course, iControl is our main API that allows you to control all of the functionality within our products, from LTM to identity to security to our WAF and so forth. And iControl now has two components. If you've been using F5 for any length of time, you know that the REST interface is new. We've had the SOAP interface for more than 10 years now, and we've added now REST with our last two releases to really bring up to the easier programming platform and really what the industry has adopted. Of course, we have the SSH and TMSH interfaces that are command line ways of programming the box as well. And some of our partners actually build their orchestration tools on top of TMSH and SSH. So you can SSH into the box, run TMSH transactions, and get the results you need. On the application side, we have our IAPS. IAPS have been around since version 10, and then updated in version 11, and more great updates are coming with IAPS. They allow you to templatize your application deployments. So we ship dozens of IAPS that our solution engineers have written. You guys can write your own IAPS too. We can talk about that today. They allow you to actually set your best practices and then make sure that every time you deploy an IAP, you're getting the exact same settings. And then of course iRules, I'm sure everyone is familiar with what we can do with the power of programming the data path. And so when we talk about the iRule programming today, we're going to dive into a lot of questions, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that, what we can do at the data plane. And then iCall, one of our newer technologies, I think it may be a little misunderstood. We'll talk more about that. Really an event-driven way to tune services as actions take place on the box. One of my favorite examples with iCall is a SharePoint example that we have. We can actually look at the health score reported by SharePoint itself and then change the ratio of the pools so that we can send less traffic to boxes that are more heavily loaded. And then on the support side, I love this feature. It's on Dev Central, integration between iControl and iHealth. Now, iHealth is our system that allows you to upload your configurations, have it analyzed in real time. With iControl, we can actually now take a QK view, snapshot of the box, automate the deployment of that to support, including opening a case. So by the time you're speaking to an engineer, your configuration is already updated, the snapshot of the box is already in the hands of the engineers. Small amount of programming, huge gains in terms of productivity. And then of course, everything we can do with logging, shipping out to analysis systems. So we'll talk today about what the right technologies are for each step of the life cycle. If you're tuning your servers, maybe you could do it with SNMP, maybe you can do it with iCall. Maybe iControl REST is the right solution, maybe it's doing it with SSH. So we'll dive into some of those details. And then on the next slide, I think it goes without saying, by taking all of these steps, we get better alignment within the business. We're able to innovate in our individual groups because we're not spending time uploading configurations to support or manually managing systems and having errors be introduced by human intervention. And that all means reduced cost in the end. So on the last slide, I just had another data point for you all when we talk about recommendations. And then we're going to talk into a lot about the nuts and bolts of how to achieve all of this. But it's really a message for the business. And it's not news to any of you folks who are interested in the nuts and bolts. But to implement automation and to implement programmability, the business really needs to invest in the skill set of the folks that are doing this programming, learn the foundational concepts, so all of the technologies that we're going to talk about today, use the resources that we provide to you and your other vendors provide to you, and then focus on automating those things that are the most painful. So don't try to boil the ocean and get all of the solutions in on day one. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but let's really go forward into this next year trying to automate all of the painful things and increase our productivity to the next level. That's it.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks so much, Nojan. Yeah, and we live, like you said, the business impacts of this are phenomenal. We live in a resource-constrained environment today. A lot of us just don't have tons of people and resources to throw at problems. So as much as you can automate, the better. And that's what we're going to talk about today. F5 provides that programmability, and so we're gonna dig into the details of that. So with that, we'll go ahead and start knocking out some of these questions that have come in. And so we'll start with some that were posted previously on Dev Central, and one of them was from Corey, who's a really active member of Dev Central. So appreciate Corey's work out there as well. And the first one he asked is there a way to configure an LTM policy in an IAP so that strict updates will see it? I think Nojan, maybe you had a thought on that.
Yeah, if you guys aren't familiar with IAPs, back really at the beginnings of F5, we started with deployment guides. So we had an engineering team, a bunch of engineers would actually build all of the application environments, SharePoint, Exchange, VMware, WebSphere, WebLogic, and we'd actually find the best practices and we would implement that into a deployment guide that we'd ship. So the next logical step was to actually put that into code. So when we built the IAP system, one of the questions was, where's that line? If you deploy something via IAP and then you go make a manual change, who is the master?
Yeah.
So we came up with this concept of strict.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to the question is no. If you have strict turned on, what you're telling the device is that the IAP is the master of the configuration.
Yeah.
And if you want to make changes outside of that, then you turn strict off. It's an advanced setting on the box, and you go through and you make your changes outside. If you run the IAP again, you're going to overwrite your config. Now, I think there's a lot of cases where it's useful to have both, and we're actually engineering new features that will allow you to do that.
Yeah, so we'll look forward to those. So, any other thoughts on that, guys?
Well, so the strictness thing is a really useful function in IAPs, and one of the things that it gets you is that it allows you to look at your application that was deployed via the IAP as a whole. And as soon as you turn strictness off and start making changes, you lose that, right? So one of the reasons to have strictness, not only is it so that things can't be modified elsewhere, but it is so that we can effectively flag things as part of an application that is an object that can be viewed as a singular unit, which is really, really handy when you have some of these larger enterprise IAPs and stuff. They deploy lots of VIPs and lots of different monitors and all sorts of different things that had to go on the box. And users, what they would like is being able to say, oh, I want to look at pick an application, and I want to look at it as an application, and it lists, oh, here's the 8 virtuals required and the state of all the monitors and all the logging stuff that's happening, and everything you configured is all in one view. And as soon as you turn strict off, that's gone. Yeah. So the whole strictness thing, can you achieve this? Well, you can make it so that you deploy things via an IAP and then you can modify them elsewhere. That's totally doable. But keep in mind that you lose a big portion of the functionality that IAPs offer you if you do that. So like Nojan's saying, we're heading towards a way to have more of a marriage of those two things. But right now, I personally think that IAPs largely, if you don't need to turn strict off, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's kind of for your own good, really. You know.
It just depends on your use case. You know, what are you is the environment changing so often? Is it very customized?
Right.
You'll probably want to turn strict off.
Makes sense.
Is it stable, and you want to have a control delineation where someone can't overwrite?
Yeah.
Then strict is very useful.
Right.
And the view you were talking about is the component view.
Yeah.
Within the IAP
Right.
tab.
Cool. Cool. Okay, so another question that came in, this one was from Corey as well, actually. Are there better examples or documentations for LTM policies? So, so any thoughts on that?
No. So policies, so everyone that's followed along, like Nojan was saying, people have been around for years and these things change names and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So LTM policies, I'm pretty sure what you're talking about is being able to do some of the CPM stuff and the policy manager, and where you can actually manage some of the traffic rewrites and matching and that kind of stuff in line. And it used to be that you would do it in an iRule and code.
Or HTTP classes.
Or HTTP classes,
Right,
right.
yeah.
Well, so it was originally only iRules.
Right.
And then we built this HTTP class thing, which was handy. And then that advanced one step further, and now we're calling it policies, right? Managed policies. So it's a relatively new feature. It's been a few versions now. And you know, to be blunt, because I'm that guy, is there better documentation? No, there's not. So if you've already checked Ask F5 and you've already checked Dev Central, those are the two places that you would go to find this stuff. And I've looked, and there is some documentation for sure. If what you're looking for is better documentation, or probably what you mean by better is more specific to your actual issue or use case, awesome. I'm sure some of these guys would be happy to help with that.
Yep.
The best thing you can do is tell us. Tell us what it is you're looking for, tell us what you can't find, and one of us, in our spare time after our day jobs, will happily go write this stuff because we're like that.
Yeah.
If you can tell me what it is you're looking for, I will happily personally go out and find out if it's possible, and if so, write about how it's possible and what it works, because it's almost certainly not you that's asking for it, right?
Yeah.
So right now, what's out there is what's out there. Again, the places to look are Ask F5 and Dev Central. Make sure you're checking both of those. And if you've looked there and can't find it, then I would ask a question in the forums, or the Q&A section, excuse me. Old school Dev Central, used to be forums. The Q&A section on Dev Central, and have somebody come by and flag it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. And I know I try to write some things on Dev Central as well, different articles or blog posts and things. And so this type of feedback is phenomenal to know, you know, hey, this is what the users want. This is what I'm going to write about. You know, so just like Colin said. So any other thoughts on that? I think Colin covered it pretty well. Maybe we'll, yeah. So it is a great point though to just say, hey, give us feedback on what you want to see, and we'll knock it out. We'll try to knock it out.
Well, and you know, it's a tangent, so I'll be brief. But really, a lot of us write for Dev Central in some fashion or another. And one of the things we're almost always looking for is, what do you want to hear?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I am very rarely going, oh, I have so many things I want to write about. I'm almost always going, gosh, I wonder what they want next, right? So if you want stuff, man, make it known and it'll get out there.
It sure will.
Nice, good point.
It sure will. Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, this is I think this is another one from Corey as well. Corey did a great job. I appreciate all his input on these questions. He said, can I disconnect users that are connected to a pool member? So, Kevin, what do you think about that one?
So the short answer is absolutely, and there's any number of ways you can do that. Any one of the APIs that have access to the sessions, whether it be iRules or iControls or SSH, TMSH, can disconnect users from pools. Absolutely.
And that speaks, I think the answer is absolutely correct, obviously. Kevin knows his stuff. But that's interesting because it ties into what Nojan was saying at the very start with the whole pick the right tool for the job. We have so many APIs available, and they all behave a little bit differently, and they all have access to a little bit different parts of the system, and they're easier or harder to use for different things. If what you want is to very simply, you know, bleed off traffic if you see a certain event happen, well then, you know, API X, probably iRules in this case, will be really, really easy to use. If what you want is every Thursday at 9 p.m. you have a change control window and you want to bleed off connections, well maybe it's iControl or iCall or, you know, so it really depends on what it is you're trying to achieve and all of the details around that. We have so many ways of doing this stuff now, which is awesome. I think it's a good thing. I think part of the barrier to entry for some folks is they look at it and go, which do I use? And really, if you ask the full question and provide all the details of what you're trying to achieve, there's lots of folks, 4 of them sitting right here, that would be happy to help answer that question. And the answer is, lots of them can do it. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, Fernando asked a question. These are again some of the questions that were out there on Dev Central previously. He said he's looking for API documentation to programmatically check on the status of LTM, GPM, GTM, wide IP, etc. In other words, check if they're up, down, enabled, disabled, that type of thing. So, what do you think?
Dev Central. I think it's right there. I think the that's maybe one of the confusion for folks that are new to the programmability is that Dev Central is the place where all of the documentation is housed for these APIs. Ask F5 will direct you to Dev Central, but use the search feature on there. It works great actually, and you should find exactly what you need.
And I know for a fact that particular example, asking about checking the status of objects, they mentioned specifically C# and .NET. Those exist. I know they exist because the guy that wrote them was just in the room a minute ago. And I mean, they're there. C#, .NET, Perl, PowerShell, all of those are up there.
And those exist for the existing iControl, the SOAP-based stuff.
Yes.
And so the beauty of the REST-based thing is that you're not really constrained to the things that are there now.
Yeah.
You can anything that can do curl, whether it's a bash script or whatever, can do an iControl REST call. So very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic, fantastic. So yeah, so again, it's out there. Just essentially use Dev Central, and that's why it's there. Okay, another one from What Lies Beneath, who's done a lot of great work on Dev Central as well. Very active contributor out there. He says, does anyone use iApps? We're good at starting again when things don't work well. Talked about Big Pipe to TMSH. Are no longer up to the jobs. It's being considered with iApps or anything else. So so it's kind of that iApp discussion. So, Nojian, I know
that's you.
Sure. Sure. I was. It's close, near and dear to my heart because my team built the iApps. The answer is definitely yes. I mean, you saw Corey had a question earlier. If you go on Dev Central, there's tons of iApp questions. But I think the gist of the question here is really, are we going to make it better?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And we are working really hard on that. Today, on our BigIQ product, actually, we've extended iApps already. So if you look at what BigIQ can do, which is our entirely new management platform, we're taking iApps and allowing you to stitch them together in some new and interesting ways. You can build your own templates based on the existing ones. Yeah. And all I can say is it's only going to get better. But this type of feedback is really useful, and what we get from these panels. Yeah. So if there's a feature that you really want in iApps, reach out. I'm the guy to talk to. So
Nojian, he's your man. Or just like we said before, just post it out there on Dev Central.
And I'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Phenomenal. Okay. So let's see. The next one, he said, considering the growth in F5's market share, product range, that type of thing, are there any plans to make things easier? So yeah. We always want to make things easier, right?
Answer? Yes. Yes, there's plans.
We're going to make it easier.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
did you want details about how?
You want an easy answer? The answer is yes.
Yes.
I mean, I'll start.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about here. I think when I said at the beginning is what we really want to do is talk about a life cycle. And one of the things that we're going to be working on is putting things in a much more a higher level. Yeah. If you look at the synthesis really vision that we put out on f5.com, it's exactly that idea of taking a lot of we're talking about very complicated and very powerful sets of solutions, right? So let's take it up a level, make it easier to understand what tools are available, what tools do you use where, and then give people a path to get into the next level. So that it's not we have so many tools now that it's not just iControl or just iRules.
Right. Multiple
flavors of everything.
You can already see the evolution in the way that we've made things simpler. Just looking at the HTTP events and commands, all these things that you can do in TCP have been drastically improved. In the HTTP commands, or even the new ASN1 compiler, the
The
dir and the
burr
burr
stuff,
stuff,
yeah.
right? I mean, if you've ever seen the old LDAP decoder and encoder iRules, I mean, wow, right? So this is huge improvement. iControl REST over the old iControl, I mean, vast improvements in simplicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wrote about that burger thing last week. It's huge. So the fixed stuff, really, this is one of those near and dear to my heart things. The past couple of years, I've spent a lot of time working in product management with the product development folks, talking about, okay, we have all of these tools and they do all these amazing things. Now the focus needs to be making them really easy to use, really easy to understand and get started with, and troubleshoot and all that stuff. And I can tell you, I of course can't talk about all the details, but I can tell you that there's been huge, huge progress getting those people, the people that are writing the actual code to build these technologies, getting them on board with the vision that, great, it's cool to build a race car, but if no one can drive it, that sucks, right?
Yeah.
So we now have the race car, and we're going with all of the usability stuff to make those things more approachable to everybody. You're right, with all the stuff you're talking about with the profiles, with some of the the different technologies we're adding, there's a lot of effort around that right now, and everyone I've talked to anyway, has bought on that that is a huge, important focus right now. So I would very much expect, without talking about specifics, to see in the near future improvements to usability and kind of legibility, understandability of a lot of these technologies, for sure.
Perfect. Yeah. So again, the short answer is yes.
Right.
And appreciate the details though. But yeah, it's definitely on our mind here to make things easier. No doubt about it. Okay. So another question from Corey Curtis asked about adding LTM policy. He says it doesn't seem to be an option in the IAP. So so another IAP question.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Awesome. More IAP users.
Yeah.
So today's IAPs can actually implement anything that you can implement via TMSH. So if you're looking at stock IAPs that are shipping with BIG-IP, then the chances are that the engineering team that's building those, and they go through a rigorous test and build process, hasn't implemented that feature. They haven't gotten around to it yet. Yeah. But if you can implement it via TMSH, and I believe you can, you can modify an existing IAP, or you can write your own IAP from scratch if you're so motivated, and implement the policy. So it's today anything you can do via TMSH, you can implement within the implementation section of IAPs.
And you can touch the policies via TMSH, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I
To make
haven't
sure
done
I'm
it personally,
not.
but
I'm pretty sure I have. To make sure I'm not going crazy here. You can. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Colin might be going crazy.
Well,
but
there's a decent
that's
chance.
a different story.
Well, you're right. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Been
Okay.
there.
Good deal. Good deal. So yeah, so that's a good feature to have as well. Another question came in and said, where can you obtain error code translation when reviewing APM errors? So
good question.
anybody want to take that one?
I have no idea.
I would, yeah.
That's unfortunately that's going to be one of those things you have to ask the Dev Central community. There's not a lot of documentation around it.
Yeah.
A lot of it's still tribal. We're working on that, of course.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I think the answer to that one is none of us know offhand.
Right.
Which,
Well, and I
know,
think it depends what errors. I'm not sure if it's if it's throwing if it's throwing an error with the code, maybe it's a support issue.
Sure.
I'd need a little more data on that one.
Yeah. And that's I guess that's true of some of the questions. It's you need more data. You need, hey, what's your specific use case? And like Kevin said, ask the community. It's that's why it's out there as well. So okay, so we have another one from Mel who said why was TMS functionality reduced compared to BigPipe? Creating some BPI rules at TMSH command line is impossible. So
And I heart BigPipe.
And I heart Big
love
heart-
BigPipe. That's right.
I heart
Less
Big
than
Pipe too.
3. Okay.
So I happily tackle the second part of this question, which is creating some iRules at TMSH is impossible. So the first part, I don't think the intention, well, I know, the intention was never to reduce functionality, right? That wasn't ever the intention. The intention was, with TMSH, was to make things more structured, easier to follow, add a lot of our own flavor to the things that were kind of built, I don't want to say piecemeal because that makes it sound bad, but BigPipe is from a different era. I mean, the boxes were configured differently. The underlying databases that held all the information about the objects were different, and we wanted to come up with something that was purpose-built for our technology. So that's what TMSH is, and it was meant to be easier to use and all that kind of stuff. The intent was never to reduce functionality. what did happen in a few places, things like this, where you're saying you can't create some iRules from the command line, that's true. So right now, if you go into TMSH and you try and create an iRule, you'll end up in an interactive mode. So it will dump you into an editor, and you can create your iRule and then save and all that kind of stuff. But if you're trying to execute a bunch of commands from the command line, that's not super helpful, right? So that is something that specifically we've talked about in the past, X number of months. It's been very recent. We've been saying some of these things that people used to do things a certain way and they now can't. We've been chasing some of this stuff down. So I know there's been talk about this thing in particular making it onto the priorities list, and I have no idea if it's going to be, if it's going to be in a release in the near future. But I know that we're looking at this kind of stuff because the intention never was to change functionality, right?
And two things too. I mean, one, there's a great cheat sheet if you've just upgraded to one of the versions where BigPipe has gone away. There's a great cheat sheet that gives you the BigPipe commands and the TMSH equivalents. That's out on Dev Central. Search for that. I lived by that for probably a good year because I heart BigPipe too. But TMSH has gotten a soft spot for me.
It grows on you.
Yeah, it does grow on you. And then another example is there's more than one way to do the iRules. So take a look at some of the IAP examples, actually. Take a look at the implementation section of IAPs. We have some big complicated iRules that are implemented via TMSH. The syntax is a little different, but it gives you an idea of how you have to structure things to get that.
Right.
But you can use iFile, you can use iControl. There's more than one way to get it up.
Oh, for sure.
I think I've actually answered this question before on Dev Central, and while you can't do it within the TM shell, you can do it from the Bash shell.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So you definitely can create an iRule from TMSH.
Well, and like Nojan's saying, there's lots of ways to get them there, right? So just because the command you're expecting to use doesn't work the way you expect it to work to add the iRule like you hoped it would, there are lots of ways to get the iRule on the box if you're looking around for the other options.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to stress a point that you said on the era, like it was a different era. I mean, we're now in a world where people have virtual editions and more than
totally
just
different.
a pair of big IPs, and BigPipe just doesn't serve that need, right? So it's the changing world.
Well, and not to mention, there was, the story gets told so many times, but the whole back when we were a V4 where we invested to write V9 and took 2 years, and that whole thing, TMSH was kind of the same idea as far as the control plane, because really look at how much is based off of it now.
Yep.
We did this whole thing with TMSH to build a language, not quite a language, but to build a shell that we could base other things on and have them usable, because iControl REST is built off of it, IAPs are built off of it, iCall uses a lot of it. This TMSH thing that we've built is leveraged all over the place in our other technologies. So really it was intended to be a very core piece that can be used as a stepping stone to get to the other, API type stuff.
Yeah. Perfect.
That doesn't mean we can't still love BigPipe.
I still love
Right.
BigPipe. I heart BigPipe.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Your love multiplies.
That's right.
Not divides.
That's
You
right.
multiply
You're
the
not
love,
alone.
not
Multiple
divide.
children.
Perfect. So Mel had another question, kind of related to this, I guess, is the direction to get TMSH to the same level as BigPipe. Our SC mentioned F5 didn't intend TMSH for the purpose of creating more complex iRules.
Oh, so this is specifically about the last question.
Yeah.
It's the not so same level as BigPipe as far as iRules are concerned. So I think I kind of just answered that, which is yes, we are looking at that, and you also answered it, which is there are currently ways you can do it. You just have to go look in the right places. So yeah, there will be changes coming, and also you can do it now if you know what you're doing. And your point is actually really, really good. Go look at some of the other things that leverage TMSH. If you're curious how it gets done, go find an IAP that inserts an iRule, and it will show you the TMSH command it had to do. So
yeah, take a look specifically at the implementation section of the IAP if you're on a big IP, or take a look at download a sample IAP from Dev Central, unzip the file, and then take a look at the way it's laid out. And in the implementation file that's in that zip, you'll see how we implement iRules with TMSH. Maybe that'll fire off some ideas for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, another question was, are there any PowerShell options for programming?
yes. I do that a lot, don't I?
Colin loves the
PowerShell's
yes or no
there?
questions,
Well,
right?
It's
No.
yes, there are. Back to the Dev Central thing.
Yeah.
I harp on that all the time. I heart Dev Central like they heart
Right.
Big Pipe. So yes, there's a lot up there on Dev Central dealing with PowerShell. I know for a fact Joe Pruitt went through and he even sat down with the Microsoft PowerShell team at one point and helped build a module that works with Big IP and all that kind of stuff. And there's an immense amount of PowerShell stuff up there. So if you're looking at doing PowerShell, especially PowerShell iControl, iControl SOAP PowerShell stuff, because Joe Pruitt is the guy that helped build iControl, so that kind of makes sense.
Right.
But those examples will carry over. I mean, if you see how to do those things, you can use the SOAP stuff or the PowerShell stuff to do all kinds of programming on Box, because we don't really care how you touch our APIs as long as you get to them, right? So
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Another one from Mel. Will F5 release a change management tool? For example, stage a change for an LTM virtual server based upon current configs, peer review, then implement and allow rollback. They hear that BigIQ device might get this. So, any thoughts on that?
Such a big
Roisin?
topic.
Yeah.
I mean, BigIQ definitely. I mean, you can see that's would fit exactly where BigIQ is. I mean, BigIQ is the scenario where you have multiple big IPs, you have a diverse environment with lots of administrators, exactly the use cases here, change control, rollback, analysis of your environments. But, being a product manager for the management side, there's so many ways to manage devices. Every customer wants their own orchestrator. They have their own ways of doing it. Well, BigIQ may fit one person's needs, but if it doesn't fit your needs, there's already ways to do this today, right? You may be using Chef, or you may be using Puppet, or you may be having another orchestration tool that's completely in-house. And so use the tools that we have to write those hooks to achieve a lot of the similar things. I was a network architect at another company before coming to F5. I wrote my own set of change management using iControl. It didn't really take that long. I was really surprised. Between the samples and just what the needs that I had, we wrote a shell that allowed people, my administrators, to actually get those changes up into the box. So is it the full rollback thing, vision that we're talking about with BigIQ? No, but it served the needs of our organization. So I guess from a higher level, we're trying to serve the needs of all of our customers. So the chances are, whatever orchestration tool you're using, there'll be a hook into BigIP. But
yep, perfect. Yeah, it talks about the flexibility as well. So, okay, and so David asked, how can I read the logs for a service in real time and parse them into a report for my users? For example, bandwidth currently being used at some URL, www.foobar.com. So, so anybody want to take that one?
Well, so I think the wording is a little bit tricky here, because to do this, I almost guarantee what you want is to not read logs. And that's not an insult at all, because I understand what you're asking, but it's if you're trying to read logs to get actual throughput information, I think you're in a world of hurt, because two things. One, that's not going to be logged very often or accurately, and two, if you're having to go read a log off the file system to then try and present something in real time, you're doing things backward as well, right?
I mean, if it has to be logs for some reason that we're missing, high-speed logging is an option, logging through our TMM data plane.
Getting the information to a log is easy. Parsing the log is less easy.
I could see a world where you're sending it to Splunk or something and you're getting real-time data. But yeah, I mean, for bandwidth, I'd want something a little more real-time.
So
I agree.
I think if it were me, if I were going to try and solve what it sounds like the problem is, I would probably, high-speed logging, absolutely, all the way. But when I was going to send high-speed logging off the box, I would also use something like an iStat or something that's local on the device, rather than a log file. Use some sort of memory structure and track it that way, right? Because that way, for whatever your VIP is, or your application, or a certain host name, or anything you want to do, you can spread it out however you want. You can track it real time as the traffic collects on the box and gets passed through. And then at any point, you just go back to that stat and call the current number, and you can display that wherever you want, right?
Or you can even set a threshold, right?
Yeah.
So, set your high water mark and then cause an alert to be
Yeah, with
issued
iCall.
With iCall.
Absolutely. If
Yeah.
you're going to use an iStat that ties directly into iCall, so you can say, in your iStat, track this host name and the throughput and whatever you want to track. And with your iCall hook, you could easily say, when you see that stat go over X threshold, then do something, and you can pick whatever you want to do. So email somebody for all I care,
You
right?
can get a lot of this information with SNMP as well. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
SNMP.
Yeah.
It's a real traditional way to do
Good point.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, I appreciate the question there. Another one online now. I hope I pronounced the name right. Srijana says, "What's the command in TMSH equivalent to show connection in the Cisco ACE, which details client's IP address with the server it's attached to?" I posted this in Dev Central. Didn't get a great answer, I guess, initially. So, any thought on that?
I want to state clearly that my background is programming. I don't know what this is. Cisco ACE ain't my bag, baby.
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I think it's Syscon show all, I want to say, but I think the thing, and I may be off in the order there, but I think the verb that you're looking for, or the modifier, the adjective you're looking for at the end is the all,
Yeah.
and that will give you the more detailed.
Is it show syscon all, right?
Yeah, I had
show's
it
always
back. I always,
first,
I always get it backwards.
Yep.
It's always the
Okay.
action first.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Good deal. Good deal. Okay. Let's see. The next one, it says says it only gives numbers of connections, but does not actually show client's IP and which server it's attached to. You know, maybe that's it was part of the last one.
Yeah.
Okay. So the
Missing
next.
the all modifier.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about that one. Next question, it says, we deployed F5 Big IP, the 8950 with APM back in 2011, and it grants users app tunnel and portal access to our internal SharePoint 2010 implementation. We did not did not use IAP for SharePoint 2010 back then. So there have been improvements with IAP. This is another IAP question, which goes
IAP
back
users,
that one.
go IAP users.
I know, man, it's
I love it.
fantastic. So there was one question: does anyone use IAP? I think
Yeah,
we're kinda,
no, the IAP
it's
questions.
great.
I'm going to go ahead
it's
and
a lot
say
of people.
yes.
There have been
Yeah.
huge improvements, and actually we can't keep up with. It's so interesting as we have a team that's focused on this, and what they do is, build the environment, and then they constantly regression test all of those changes. So yes, there have been. You want to go to Dev Central, you want to download the latest SharePoint IAP. Always look for that. There's one for 2013. There's one for 2010. Use that. I mean, there's been more enhancements to Exchange than SharePoint. SharePoint's a little more static for sure, but there's still been improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you didn't use I think the question was that they didn't.
They didn't use it.
didn't
They
use it
did
back
not
then, yeah.
use the IAP back then. Yeah,
back
so
then, right.
that's part of if you're upgrading, then it becomes a question of do you run the IAP? I would say definitely run the IAP. Look at the component view of everything that gets laid out, and then maybe you can just pick and choose the pieces that you need from that component view
Yeah.
to bring it into your existing installation. So
That's a really good point too. That component view thing is kind of magic because you can do it that way, where you already have your app up and running, and you see that a new IAP comes out, or you want to see what the IAP would do, or you can run the thing and then go look at what it creates and say, is that useful compared to my current config? And like you said, if you want, at some point, pick the parts you want of it, right? I mean, yeah, absolutely. Very good idea.
powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful. Okay, so Carlos asked a question: any news on making access policy customization have more features? So it's kind of one of those what's up and coming kind of questions.
APM.
You're the
Yeah.
access guy, right?
Yeah. I don't have the inside track, but I
Sure.
I believe that there is some intention to make customization much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I guess it kind of goes back to what Colin was saying earlier. We've got a lot of things kind of in the queue. Can't necessarily talk about all of them right now, but it's certainly on our radar.
So the access, there
fine.
is. Speaking of inside track, he's in the field a lot. I should be nicer and help with this stuff. That's obviously the PD stuff because I talk to him all the time. There is stuff absolutely in works right now around APM and policies and ease of use, and it really ties back into that. How easy are all of our modules and features to use? And it's a big focus right now. So we are making those things a concerted effort to try and improve those.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so next question from Jesse. Would like to know if there's a way to know if a virtual server or pool is losing connectivity. I know that the health can tell me if the service is up or down, but is there another way to send the alert? So, the whole monitor kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
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 Oh,
so
sorry.
many. I see the gears spinning
I
on
know.
all the possible ways you could do that.
Well, the very brief, yes. So there are lots and lots and lots of ways to monitor the health of a pool or an application. It really depends on how you define a healthy application, right? Because your monitor can do anything from ICMP pings to you can go through and do more synthetic tests with a GET or a POST or whatever, to you could start writing things that are actually making a call into the app, and then based on the response it gets, using iCall or iControl or something to actually talk. I mean, you can do all sorts of stuff depending on what it is you want to achieve. So my suggestion, and I say this to everybody that I talk about programming to, my suggestion is always write down actually what the problem is you're trying to solve and your desired result. And if you can define that really succinctly and then start asking questions about how to solve that exact problem, you'll almost always find the answer, because the code is usually the easy part.
Right.
Yeah.
When I talk to people about these APIs, I often include monitors as one of the API choices. We call them EAVs or ECVs. Anything you can imagine in the management plane, from curl, Perl, Bash, OpenSSL, all the Bash commands. You can virtually do anything inside of an application from the command line. Right, very, very powerful tools.
Yeah. I mean, speaking from the product management perspective, I mean, it's getting a little philosophical, but is the BIG-IP a monitoring platform, or is it not? I mean, certainly we want first-class monitors. We want the ability to have really powerful monitors, but are customers using BIG-IP as their sole monitoring tool? Probably not. So the thing that we're looking at is, how do we add to the layering?
Sure.
So I mentioned that actually, speaking of SharePoint from the last question, I mentioned briefly that iCall solution that's out there. So the way that works is the SharePoint is inserting a health score. So it's telling you, hey, I'm losing connectivity. I know WebSphere does this. WebLogic does the same thing. So we have an iRule that's looking for that header, pulling it out, and then iCall is actually adjusting the health of the pool. So our idea is, okay, monitoring is fine, but by the time you got the message, you get the SMS on your phone or whatever, if you still carry a pager, that it's down, you've already had a problem. So, and maybe BIG-IP reacted to it, maybe it didn't. Why not actually automatically tune the thing? WebLogic is telling you that this server's Java heap size is growing. Why not set the ratio down on that, so you're already lessening the problem by the time you get to it?
Avoidance rather than recovery.
Avoidance rather than recovery.
Exactly.
Or at least let your people do the recovery in a relaxed fashion instead of as a hair on fire.
Right.
The site is down, or half the site is down.
I would definitely argue that that monitoring is just as important as load balancing. Right. I mean, you can't have high availability if your servers are down.
Sure.
Right.
And there's some great features coming on the monitoring front that I can't talk about.
And that monitoring goes way above up down, right? It goes way above up down.
Absolutely,
Because the whole, everyone's seen it by now, but it happens over and over, where you get somebody that has ineffective monitors that just say, oh yeah, it's up, but then you get garbage back as a response, because it's up according to what that monitor's checking.
That's right.
But the actual user experience is more in depth, and so you get a response back that looks accurate to the monitor, but the user says, what is this, and all that noise, right?
Yeah, so I wrote a EAV for SAP that, like you were saying, the customer wanted a full check from web server to app server to database. Or in the SAP world, it's a little different, but you give it the login credentials, it actually logs in, so you're testing the entire stack. Really powerful, right? So you're not just testing web page up, web page down, but you're actually testing the Java stack and the database.
Yeah,
Right.
That's cool. Okay, so next question comes in, says, can you manage external and internal DNS through the F5?
Yeah. Sure.
Heard Kevin.
I was trying so hard not to say it. I'm glad somebody else said it finally. I was trying so hard to go with the yes.
Colin simply says yes today. Yeah, that's awesome. No.
So
So Kevin, did you have a thought on that, or?
I think it really depends on the API and the external interfaces to the internal and external DNS. If you can reach it from a remote device, then absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of those, we play really well with anything that will let us talk to it, right? We have all of these APIs and these abilities to either reach out to other applications or have applications, reach into us and make changes. And whichever direction that goes, we're good with. And as long as those devices, or those systems, I suppose, allow for us to reach out and figure out what's going on and manipulate things, then yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's a use case thing. I look at your, like, I love the way you phrase that, you know, put down your problem set. So we had this discussion a lot when it comes to tunneling and disparate data centers. Who do you want to be the thing that's in charge? You're going to program something. Are you programming Big IP and putting Big IP in charge of it? Or are you using Big IQ and letting Big IQ manage the Big IPs? Or are you having an orchestration tool tell the Big IP to make a DNS update on GTM? And so analyze the whole thing, write down the problem set, and then map it to the tool set.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so another question comes in from Melvin. He wants to know how to determine which VIP is servicing by looking at the pool configuration. So
you can look at the network map and see that.
Yeah.
Network. I think the question is what VIPs are associated to a pool? Am I reading that?
Oh,
yeah.
I don't understand the question. So
Yeah.
how to determine which VIP is servicing by looking at the pool
it's
configuration?
hierarchical, right? So you know, a pool is tied to a VIP. So if you look at the VIP, the pool, you don't necessarily see its parent.
Sure.
But if you look at the network map, and you can
gotcha.
search in the map and find
Like
exactly
pool.
where that pool lives.
Yeah.
I got you. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the I have a pool and it's passing, it's getting traffic passed to it and all that kind of stuff, and which VIP is passing it traffic, because you might have one pool that's got lots of VIPs and all that noise, right?
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
The
That
network
makes
maps
sense.
in the UI, in the upper left-hand corner.
In the UI,
and the-
absolutely. And I used to get this question a lot when I was managing Big IPs before coming to F5. You know, somebody would call and say, my application is not getting traffic, and so what's your application? Well, I'll give you an IP address. Well, I don't know what your application is.
Right.
Right. So I'll look at the pool members and I'll search back to the VIP.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
and
that's a great way to do
just
it.
because we're on the programmability panel and I'm that way, you can do all of this through code too, right?
Sure.
So the network map is a great way to do it. I'm not at all discounting that. That's probably the way you'll want to do it most of the time if you're just trying to find a single, VIP relationship. However, if you're trying to do something a little more in depth and you're curious to run reports about, I want to look for the highest use pools and then trace those back to the VIPs and put a report out once a week, and you can actually do this stuff via iControl. I know SOAP, and I'm pretty sure REST as well. I haven't done it in that. I've done it in SOAP, but where you can go and track by usage and sort and then fire those back to which VIPs are sending it. And you can do all of that stuff programmatically as well. It's pretty cool.
And you could put it inside of a periodic iCall and have it run on a regular basis.
There you go.
There you go. I like it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Wow.
Layer the layers.
Yeah, a lot of different options. Cool. Okay, so Jeff asks, wants to know about APM error codes and how to find out where in the flow it's failing.
I think this was a follow-up to the earlier question.
Right.
Yeah. It was. Okay. So, and I know we kind of talked about that. So let's see. So the next one is, we'd like to see more document detailing how modules and features work, help on configuration and troubleshooting, rewrite engine is working, those types of things. Let's see. So essentially more documentations on features. So I know we already talked about that a little bit.
So this is great. Really, the problem I think that this person is facing is that we add a lot of features to the products. We add a lot of modules and even features to each module, and that those things come out pretty rapidly. And while we document them, I think for a lot of use cases, the people are continually finding different ways to use that stuff that they aren't sure what they need to do, which is not really a bad problem to have. It just means that people are doing things in lots of different ways, and we need to help them out with that. Great. If you can give us examples of what you're trying to do and the things you can't figure out, I know that I and a lot of people at F5 and in the community are really happy to help with that.
Yeah.
But we document things as the modules come out. We do our best to get information out there about how they work and what they work for. But you just can't possibly document every possible use case, right?
Sure.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to suggest deployment guides again. The deployment guide section on
Really
Ask
good.
F5 and as well as F5.com. It's not on Dev Central today. Gives you real-world examples of how our solution engineering team has deployed applications.
Absolutely.
So you can go and look at that and get some really good ideas on these are what we think are the best practices, and maybe it's to use a data group instead of using a switch statement, or maybe it's to use a policy instead of a class, or maybe whatever it may be, right? And then it'll give you some ideas on what we think are the best practices.
That's really good. And I want to tie this back into an earlier comment that we've made a couple of times now as well, which is there is a huge focus on making things easier to use and more consumable. And I don't want to at all sound like I'm saying, oh, tough, we're never going to do more documentation. We are absolutely intending to make things easier to uptake and use. And what I'm saying about that is that the way you can help us do that is tell us what you want to see. You know, that there is not a better time than right now to try and get your needs met as far as documentation. People at F5 are very focused on making things easy to use and consume. So if you have that stuff, now's a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. So great, great to have that feedback. Okay, let's see. Walter says, how can I block ICMP packets from reaching my internal and external VLAN interfaces? Is there any solution article that I can follow? So,
ICMP. AFM module?
Right.
Well, that's a so that's like a layer 2 thing. So if you've got a live VIP, it's gonna ping back.
Yeah.
So it's AFM or filters.
Yeah.
IP filters.
The way things are set up right now is there is not a way to make a virtual not respond to an ICMP packet.
Well, you can disable it, but
well, sure.
then disable it.
Okay, so thanks, Mr. Pedantic. I'll go ahead and restate. What I mean is there's no way to make a live virtual not respond to ICMP packets. If you're right, you can turn it off. That if you unplug the network cable, it'll stop responding. But that's not.
But specifically, it's not actually disabling it in the disable enable. I think there's a lot of confusion about this, right? You have to actually go into the
turn it all the way off.
Turn it all the way off.
Right.
Yeah.
But your point, both of you made the same point, which is if you do something that's more of a firewall layer, so AFM or filters and that kind of thing, you can stop it for a specific IP as well. Yeah, for sure.
Makes sense. Okay. So Tim asks, I wanted to load balance internal anonymous relay in Exchange. I wanted to maintain a list of approved IPs within Exchange, so junior admins, help desk could maintain the list. Using SNAT on the LTM breaks this. Disabling SNAT requires I change the EXC server's default gateway. I don't want to do that. What are my options?
Where's our Exchange guru?
Yeah. So this is a pretty common question, I think. SNAT has some really good use cases. Obviously, primarily it's the force return traffic back through the box. But the downside, of course, is that you lose the source address, and you don't. In a lot of cases, you want to keep that. So what do? You turn off source address. You turn off SNAT, and then you're faced with a routing problem. Making the default gateway the big IP on your servers is obviously one approach. Another approach is to simply just inject those client source addresses into HTTP headers or some other payload. Right. So that's.
I just don't know if Exchange supports that. I know the guy who knows. If you post on Dev Central, he will surely respond to
Exchange runs on IIS, and IIS supports it.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think for a while we actually had an IIS module, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
For catching X forwarded for.
Yeah, it's still out there. It's just for an older version of IIS.
For an older version of IIS.
But in all seriousness, we have a team that's completely focused on Exchange. So believe it or not, so those guys will get back to you if we put that question on Dev Central.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a great question. Okay. All right, so another question, any recent graphical F5 LTM config mapping tool like Visualizer available, compatible with 11.2 and higher? Any programming tools you can suggest to build one? I guess if it's not available. So.
I've not used a config mapping tool on the BIP before.
Yeah, the graphical tool that we're working on is BigIQ.
Right.
That's, if you go and you play with BigIQ, you'll see that's a lot of the visualization that they're trying to do in that is similar to the question being
asked. So if anybody hasn't touched BigIQ yet, it's worth a look for sure, because it really is what we're putting a lot of energy into right now as far as management of devices as well as objects on devices, IAP management and all that kind of stuff as well. So it can do some of those type of things, but as far as an actual visualizer, I've not built one for BigIP.
This is a larger question too in terms of orchestration. A lot of our partners have built orchestration tools that allow you to graphically manage BigIP.
Sure.
But it's small subsets of everything BigIP can do.
Right.
From IBM to VMware Orchestrator. We just released a solution with Cisco last week. It's it's all, again, the use case. But I mean, for a full visualizer, and what I'm picturing is this, sort of a visual policy editor for LTM config. No. Is that something we dream about? Yes.
Often.
How useful would it be? I don't know, but I like the question.
Well, it's one of those things, and it's a really rough battle, right? Is that everyone wants the really complex stuff to be simpler, but the problem is there's a reason that it's complex to start with, right? When you look at an LTM and all of the things that it can do, I mean, it's this gigantic myriad of things, and if you're like, oh, we'll make it simple to look at, well, okay, we could display that in a simple graphical format, but then it's going to be kind of big animal pictures, and you'll lose so much of the granularity because if you want to be able to toggle every single option, it's not going to be simple anymore, right? So there's definitely a push and pull there. Is it something we're looking at? Yes, it's always on the horizon, on the radar. BigIQ is absolutely doing some of it, but as far as an individual situation, I think it's a good comment, right? Is that there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so the next one deals with SSL offloading. The question is it better to take advantage of IAPS for SSL offload?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, there's no difference on the functionality of the box whether you're using IAPS for SSL or not. I mean, what we make it super easy in an IAP to say, do you want offload, do you not? You pick your cert that you've already uploaded to the box, and you've got offloading. It's just right there in one, but it's in the back, it's actually implementing SSL profile, server profile, client profile, cert. So there's no difference, we just make it easier to implement.
That's a really good point, though, in general, because I think a lot of folks that aren't super familiar with IAPS might not quite understand that it really is doing, it is an API. It is doing the same things that you would do in TMSH. It is, in fact, firing TMSH commands to make those things happen, right? So there's no difference as far as the performance or traffic implications or anything if you use the IAP versus if you don't. It is purely a management difference. And as Nojum was saying, it makes it super easy. The IAP's awesome. So if it works for you, why not use it?
Yeah. Simplify. That's cool. Okay, another IAP question. Can an IAP deploy configs across devices, for example, VIPs that interact?
Great question. I love that, Ben. No, today it can't. BigIQ is really taking some of that functionality, and there's BigIQ IAPs today. So indirectly, you can, but it's. I think it's a feature that's still in the works. Probably what you're thinking is future. So.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe on the roadmap. Okay, so another question is, I think there's a bug in some versions with TMSH shows syscon. Don't interrupt the output, or the TMM could core, something along those lines. I'm not,
I love the username.
VLAN90, yes, that one. Fantastic.
That's pretty specific. Basically, it's saying that if you run a show syscon and interrupt it, their box is coring. So if there's any case in which your box is coring, that should be a support case.
Something is definitely wrong.
That's really not the way it should work. I can't recall running exactly that, but I can't imagine doing a syscon and then interrupting it would core a box. If that's happening, I appreciate you watching us, but while you're watching us, you should also create a support case and send them your core file and the description of the problem and the command you're running to do it, because that really shouldn't be happening. So if you are seeing that problem, this is kind of the whole, if in case of a real emergency, do not call us, call 911. If it's a problem, asking us is awesome, but that shouldn't be happening, so call support.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah. Is that flippant? I don't mean to be
flippant. No, don't. Yeah.
No, I mean it's the
flippant.
truth. It's the truth, though. Yeah, that's good. But we do appreciate the question. Okay, so Misty asks, is there any way to clone all config except network configuration to a second LTM? I want to take all pool, virtual server, iRule, et cetera, and dump that config on another LTM in a different building, requires different IPs, all that. So, Kevin, what do you think?
The SEP is the simple configuration profile thing. Yeah, so it's a command line tool like the archive, that allows you to basically break it down into a text file, and you just take that text file and you edit out what you don't want, and then import it back on the other box.
It's not quite a one command thing.
No, it's definitely not a one command thing.
Right, but you can grab the config and jump it into a text file, and then, like you said, you go nuke the IPs where you want.
And you can even export specific sections of a config and then import it into another one. So I could dump out just the virtual servers or just the pools into a text file, and then import that text file into the other box, doing I think it's a merge. Yeah.
Yep.
And that,
Perfect.
if you do the things that don't require IPs, like give me all of my pools or give me all of my iRules or my, pretty quickly you can get large chunks of the config moved over without touching any IP information,
Absolutely.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, it's totally possible. That's a great deal. Okay, so Jared asks, my current processes utilize TMSH. Is there any advantage to switching those over to iControl in future release?
Ooh, what a great question.
I love that question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start. Everybody chime in when you want to.
Yeah.
This is exciting stuff. I'm a geek, I know. It's okay. So you're using TMSH. First of all, that's awesome. Second of all, iControl. So iControl now is two different things, right? iControl SOAP, iControl REST. iControl SOAP is very much its own thing. It's got custom methods that were built into the box. If you are doing things in TMSH, there is not necessarily any reason to move away from TMSH. It's working, it's fine. So the question really becomes, is there a benefit to moving to iControl REST, which is built on TMSH? And it really depends on what you mean by advantage. So if you're getting what you want done with TMSH, I would say don't mess with it. But if you want to move things into iControl, you're going to use the exact same commands, the exact same parameters. It should be a really easy switch. And now you have a huge amount more flexibility because you have a script that is executing all of these things rather than just a series of TMSH commands, right?
Right.
So really, there's a lot of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But from my perspective, I'm excited about the new iControl REST stuff. If you're doing things in TMSH now and can see that you might be on the path to doing more complex things, or there's some things that you might want to do that are a little bit difficult with just TMSH now, iControl REST is a great answer for that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yeah, you summed it up.
Oh, darn. Sorry.
No one else even.
But it was
chime in.
exciting. It was
Yeah,
to
exciting.
say.
I loved it. Yeah, it's good excitement. Okay, so let's see. Jared asks, my LTM application configuration creation processes utilize TMSH. Is there advantage to switching those over to IAP or iControl going forward? So
Basically the same thing.
Same
Yeah,
thing. I
essentially
mean,
the same.
well, he added IAP to that one, so I've
Yeah,
got to
oh,
put in a 2
no
cents.
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
No shame for IAP. Secret.
You know, it highlights one of the points, right? Which is the IAP lets you containerize and really templatize a set of functionality that you want to stamp out over and over again. And you can parameterize those things as well, so it doesn't have to be hard coded.
Yeah.
But you know, iControl, I think of small pieces. You're maybe adding a pool member. Maybe you can write a small IAP to, let's say, create a pool associated with a, you know, add the members, associate a monitor, set a ratio, and then you want to stamp that functionality out over and over again. Maybe you do that in an IAP. So they're different sized solutions for your cases. Think
Sure.
of it that way.
Sure.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Stefan asks, is it possible to completely manage ASM policy with iControl, deployment, config change, rollback, etc.?
I want to say no.
Oh, so
Yeah.
I want really badly to say yes, but
Yeah.
I also don't want to have somebody jump off a cliff. So I've not tried doing absolutely everything through iControl. I know that iControl can do a lot of that stuff. Like just now I was digging, well, just not now, but you know, the other day, I was digging through a bunch of the iControl REST stuff and how it works with ASM, and there's absolutely integration there, and you can do a huge amount of stuff. Yeah. Would I be comfortable today saying you will never have to touch the box? No, I wouldn't.
Right,
I
right.
wouldn't.
Yeah, I
I
think
wouldn't
the
say
key word there is completely.
Yeah, it's hard to.
I think you can do a massive majority of it programmatically. I think you will probably always want to expect to have somebody that is able to log in and be comfortable issuing whatever commands you need or going to the GUI and touching things and gets comfortable with that. Just because I wouldn't personally be comfortable saying, oh, you'll never have to log into the box again. I don't think we're quite at that place.
Well, and I'd love to hear the use case.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've had a lot of these customer conversations, and it seems we've implemented the things that the majority of customers have asked for.
Yes.
And it's tempting because, again, I'm focused on this full time, right? I want everything to be controlled via the API.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Some things are harder to expose programmatically. I mean, it actually becomes painfully difficult. But I'd love to hear the use case. You know, what is it that that we can't do that would really make your life easier, and then give us some time to go work on that. I'd love that feedback. So.
And look, the next question kind of ties in, which is what's the best solution? What is it, iControl or iCall or TMSH?
Yeah.
And since they're kind of the same thing, right? Can I fully manage it? And if I'm going to manage ASM, which do I use? And I can tell you there aren't TMSH commands for ASM, so I wouldn't go that route. But iControl absolutely does work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably the most common use case is managing policies around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yep. That's right. Okay. And then the next one is what's the impact on the box when making call with iControl? Talk about huge CPU increase, that kind of thing. So, not sure.
Not much.
Yeah.
So I don't have numbers to pull out to give exact details, but let's see. So the older SOAP version of iControl was built to do largely bulk type operations. So it was very much designed to say, I want to send one call to make 5,000 changes and that kind of thing, right? It was very centered around large transactions, right? So you would send in a multi-tiered array and say, I want to do these things to lots of different objects, and it was based on SOAP, and it was a little bit heavier, and inherently each call was a bit more expensive, which is why it was designed to do bulk operations. And so each call had a slightly higher overhead, but then it would do lots of things at once. We've found that the iControl REST stuff, it was built intentionally to make it very lightweight for smaller, simpler calls, because a lot of people, especially the people administering these boxes, really want a simple, fast, lightweight way to script some things. I might want to write a program that does 26,000 things, but that's pretty rare compared to the person that wants to say, oh, I need to add these 3 VIPs, or I need to take this box offline for a while, or whatever the small, concise function is. So the iControl REST stuff, we did a lot of testing around performance, and the per call to the box cost went dramatically down. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, I forget, so I don't want to quote inaccurately, but it was orders of magnitude faster as far as being able to send and respond individual requests, which is important because it's much more granular, or much more granular per operation, right? So you say, do this, do this, do this.
You're going to have more calls.
Thank you,
Yeah.
I'm stumbling.
Yeah.
Each in individual HTTP calls, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal. Okay, so the next one is Eric asks, any plans to beef up the PowerShell module, bring it in more in line with the 3.0 and plus PowerShell paradigms, simplify operations, that kind of thing? So,
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know if any plans. I think it's so much of the requests are focusing on REST, and everyone wants to move to REST. But I think PowerShell, unlike the other interfaces, is unique because it's actually a programming environment more than just a SOAP API that we're providing. So I think there's lots of good reasons to support PowerShell 3. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's working on it.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Right.
okay, fair enough, fair enough. Okay, and then the next one, it says for upgrade to a load balancer HA pair, is there any special backup need for IAPS, et cetera, apart from a regular UCS
That's a good
backup?
question too, actually.
Yeah,
that is a good
it's a great
question. There's no special backup needs that I can think of.
No, the IAPs are a part of your config.
Yeah.
So it's the IAP itself will be described in the config, even though it is a thing that affects the config. It's described in the config.
Right.
So if you back up your config, you should get all of your apps as well.
Yeah, there is some details. I mean, depending on where you're upgrading, you may be getting a newer version of an IAP.
Oh, sure.
So what you want to be careful of is, are you in strict mode with the IAP, or have you just deployed it via the IAP and now you're running the config?
That's a good point.
And so you want to take that into account. If you are in strict mode and you're going to a version where the IAP that you've deployed has been significantly updated, then there are some considerations there. And that's case by case. And I think, I'm sure there's some best practices out there for that, but a good follow-up question.
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to that case. Are you in strict mode or not?
Right, right. Talked about that earlier a little bit. Okay. Perfect. Okay, another IAP question. Carlos asked if there's an IAP for MS Link 2010. I don't know.
Not Link. Or, God. I want to say there is, but I think there was a whole messaging platform that Microsoft has. It's part of that.
Oh, okay, it's part of.
What's that called?
and it's
OCS or whatever, right? No,
It's
something else.
escaping me right now.
Okay. Good question, though. We can
Yeah,
we can
Office
follow up on that.
communication server,
Oh, well, OCS. Nice.
Yeah,
yeah.
and because I don't have that all of the IAPs memorized. On Dev Central, there is a list
I can't believe it.
that shows both the F5 verified or F5 provided IAPs, the community supported IAPs, and then anything else that has been submitted by community members. So just search on Dev Central for the IAP list, and you'll bring up that page, and you'll have the answer before I will, because I don't have a computer.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. Yeah, go search right now. And speaking of wiki documentation, this was one that actually came out prior to the Guru panel. It says most articles seem out of date or incomplete, that type of thing. Are there plans to improve the documentation?
All together now. Yes.
So this one is physically painful because, oh my gosh, yes, is the answer. And I can't tell you anything about it, which is a little bit tough. So we'll do my best tap dancing routine to give you as much information as you can. Are there plans to improve it? Holy cow, yes. I have been working with the iRules documentation for 9.5 years. I can tell you that we have had a bit of a struggle at times getting things completely documented, and I can tell you that if things go the way I believe they're going to go, and the way that we are already making progress towards going, all of that will go away. And that so much better documentation will start coming on Dev Central, and that it won't only be on Dev Central. And what else can I say without getting in trouble? I can say that the PD team, I can say this, the product development team responsible for building these tools, iRules, iControl, all this stuff, the teams that are doing that have completely bought in on the idea of the need for this documentation, and they are putting in place mechanisms to ensure that it happens. Is that going too far?
No, but it's no, it's a fair criticism. The thing is, I mean, it just shows our approach to iRules and our programmability is that we've started small, and then we've grown where customers have given us feedback. And there was a time when we could keep up.
Oh yeah.
And
I
now,
remember those days.
Now everything is popular. I mean, there's so many of the features are used. So
well, and another thing that happens is now it used to be that iRules and iControl, and they were smaller subsets of things, but as the capabilities of the core product grows, we have iRules and iControls and all the stuff that touch all of it. So the amount of new features being added per release has gone through the roof, which is great, unless you're the guy trying to document it, and then it's really less great.
Well, the fun part that you can't talk about is that I think the solution is
so
really
good.
wonderful.
It's so good, and I wish I could tell you guys. I really do, and I can't, but it's there, and it's going to be really good, and I'm super excited. So that's all I can say.
Next Guru
Stay
panel.
tuned. Yeah, be good. Okay, so next question, and again, one that came prior to the Guru panel today. Will I ever be able to pull logs off a device via iControl?
Who wants it?
So, yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the answer is that you currently can, depending on what you mean by pull logs. So this is again the whole logging real time versus an out of band thing. If what you're talking about is to download log files, totally, you can download files. That's a thing that you can do with iControl, no problem. Whether it's a config file or a log file or a key file, or we don't care, go download a file. If you're talking about statting a log to get X number of lines, that's a different kind of thing that we don't.
You mean like real time?
Like real time, saying,
like
hey, give
tail
me
F via iControl.
Exactly. We aren't doing that right now. If that's what you're asking for, I would love to talk to you about it, because I would love to know why you're trying to do it, what your goal is, and all that kind of stuff, because maybe it is something we should look at, and if so, we need details, right? So that's a conversation I'd love to have.
Yeah. No, that's good.
But downloading a log file, yes, you can totally download a log file.
Yeah, easy enough. Okay, perfect. So, so Tom asks, can you recommend a source for Chef to iControl examples for adding nodes, pools, virtual servers, and maybe not to jump forward, but there was another one similar to this, Chef and Puppet.
On Puppet.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to maybe talk about some of that together, or.
I mean, first off, I think part of making things easier is making all of these examples easier to find. I mean, we shouldn't be having Guru panels for people to find out where these examples are. So I mean, I'll take that absolute feedback from that level. But yeah, there's a couple of articles on Dev Central about Chef. If you look at the dates, I think don't get freaked out. I think they're a little older, but the good news is nothing has really changed. I mean, when we're talking about nodes, pools, and virtual servers, these are fairly straightforward tasks. And I looked at the article on Puppet that we have on Dev Central, and it's the engineer that's working on that has tested it. It's working. Puppet can take community input as well. So there's different modules that are out there that people have contributed. It's the same thing with Chef as well. So there's Chef recipes out there for doing exactly that. And a couple of the good ones are on Dev Central.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Next question says, I'm not sure I understand how sessions and transactions prevent one client or user overriding the changes of another.
That's got to be iControl, right?
This is part of iControl.
Yeah, it's got to be.
So you got a thought, Kevin?
You talked. You're stuck with it now. Sorry.
Right. I should.
You spoke.
There really isn't. I mean, that's not really the point of the iControls. It's a provisioning interface. So whoever writes to it last is gonna win that battle.
Yeah. Some of this is interpreting questions, right? So I'm going to go ahead and assume what you mean is, how do you make it so that if two people are writing to the same object at the same time, you don't get overlap? But you don't. It's going to be a race, and whoever happens to write that object last, that is what's going to stick in the config.
Yeah.
And if the further question, I'm going to go ahead and infer, because I'm like that, is how would you know that happened? You wouldn't. You don't. That's the whole. When you are giving out the keys to programmatic management interfaces, be sure that you're giving them out to folks that know how to check for that stuff, and that you're building tools that account for those things, right? This isn't an iControl deficiency. This is any API anywhere in the world is going to have very, very similar behavior, in that if you have the authority to write, and I have the authority to write, and we both happen to fire the same write at the same time, or close to the same time, one of us is going to get the thing we want done. And that's how it is.
Yeah,
right?
you need an abstraction layer in there. So BigIQ is our management plane that lets you do that. So it's going to smooth out some of this. And then we've worked with our partners to do that as well. So again, there's not one tool for everybody. So Netcool, which is an IBM product, the way they solve this is they actually have an interface where you put all of the changes for your BigIP within Netcool, and then it actually pushes it out.
Oh, cool.
So if you have multiple administrators, then that layer is deciding who gets what.
Sure.
And they also have a rollback functionality.
Cool. Okay. So David asked several questions on Dev Central again prior to the Guru panel, so appreciate his input. One of which was, what's the difference between iControl SOAP and iControl REST, and which one will remain in the future, or will they both remain? That whole thing.
Can I answer this backwards?
Right.
So the first question, I'm going to turn this around.
Right.
Which one's going to remain in the future? Both. Yes, both.
Yeah.
The plan is absolutely both. And there's a good reason for that. We have lots of people using the SOAP stuff right now, and lots of people using it in a very big way. And we're not big enough jerks to go break all that, because it would be really, really bad for everybody involved. So the SOAP stuff isn't going anywhere for the foreseeable future. Don't worry about that. What's the difference is the first part of the question that I'm going to answer last. Well, huge. The differences are massive. One is built on SOAP XML. One is built on REST and JSON. One is the SOAP stuff is built, like I said kind of earlier, to be large data chunks. It's meant to be shipping out large numbers of modifications at once. Not that you can't do things at specific granular levels for individual changes, but it's a higher cost. The REST model was way more. Think administrators that can code, not necessarily programmers that have to administer, right? The iControl REST stuff was very much designed with people that know how to use the box in mind, that might want to script some and write applications that then use these boxes.
That's not to say programmers don't love REST. I mean,
of course they do.
The problem with SOAP is you have to have SOAP libraries that can actually understand and put together and take apart, and all the iControl work I've done as an F5 administrator has been SOAP.
But it's higher cost.
It's painful.
Higher cost to you,
yes,
I mean,
it's
right?
higher cost to the person writing it. The REST interface is so simple.
You run one curl command, you're done.
It's fantastic. I love REST. As much as I love Big Pipe, I love REST.
Yeah, right?
It's so fantastic.
And it's also universal. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to have a library for it. Anything that can consume a a REST call. You
Yeah,
do
from
anything.
you can do it from anywhere.
You can do it
I
from
can
a-
fire off a REST call from my iPhone or my HTC or whatever,
There's
right?
apps for Chrome that
Yeah,
you can fire
absolutely.
off
Yeah.
REST. Yeah.
Well, and I just talked about how it's made for people that administer the boxes, but it also really is the paradigm by which most APIs are built these days, right? I mean,
For good reason,
for
because
good
it's
reason.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm not trying to bash SOAP. I know one guy here who would be mad if I did. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm really not trying to bash SOAP. SOAP is fantastic for what it does, right? If you are looking to have large transactions and make multiple changes with one call, SOAP is fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with it. And if you're currently using SOAP and it works, great.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no way SOAP is going away, like
No.
you said, and when it does, whenever because all things come to an end, but there'll be years and years of notice.
And
so.
interestingly, I've heard the question a bunch of times since releasing the REST stuff from folks that are using SOAP going, oh, well, is this the new thing? What, should I move over? Is it going to be better performance? Is it going to be...
If you want.
The reality... That's exactly the right
Yeah.
answer, if you want to. If you can... I keep going back to this. If you can write down the problem you're trying to solve, and we can help you choose the right tool for the job, and that happens to be REST, great.
Yeah.
The chances are, if you've already built a somewhat complex solution in the SOAP stuff, and it works...
Go with it. But if
Have
you're
at it,
starting
man.
today, if someone came to me today and said, I know you have these APIs, you've got REST, you've got SOAP, which one should I use?
Sure.
Of course, the next question is, well, what are your use cases? What are you trying
As
to
it should
do?
be.
But probably 99%, I'm going to say use the REST
Sure.
interface because you're
And
going to
there's-
be much happier in the near term and long term.
There's lots of good reasons for it. It's lighter weight, it's easier to use for a lot of people, and one of the big things that I talk about with the REST stuff, you can tell I kind of like this, so I apologize for the rambling, but one of the big things I talk about a lot is that it is effectively a shim layer that sits on top of TMSH, which is a really good thing, because that means that anything you can do via TMSH, you can do via iControl REST, and it means that as we go forward and add more functionality for the modules and the products, as we add TMSH commands, they're automatically part of iControl REST, whereas it's an out-of-band process to get them into the SOAP, and so it might be a delay and all this kind of stuff, right? It's deeply wired into the product in the direction that our products are moving, and I think that's a valuable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So we are coming up on the end of our time here. We've just got a couple minutes left. And unfortunately, we were not able to get to every single question, but like we said before, we're going to go through at least the ones that we were not able to answer today. Keep posting on Dev Central as well, please. And I think even the chat session will stay open for a little while. So please continue to throw the questions at us. Colin or one of us will have a blog post out there in the near future to answer all of those, to make sure all the questions are answered. So with that, maybe we'll just take a couple of quick minutes to for any kind of final thoughts or any sort of parting discussion. So Kevin, maybe we'll start with you. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add based on what we've talked about today.
No, just go back to something that we talked about in the very beginning. Some simplicity. We've evolved a lot. A lot of these commands have made life a lot simpler, from TCP to HTTP to ASN1. The product has made life a lot easier, and in a lot of respects, you don't have to use iRules or in the such to do things that you would have had to do in the past.
Sure.
But when you do need to use them, you have an amazing tool set. Right? You have so many different ways of making stuff happen.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very cool product.
Awesome. All right, good deal. I appreciate that. All right,
Sure.
so Colin, any...
Yeah, lots of them, obviously. I can't stop talking. So my big thing that I've touched on several times is know what you're looking for, find the tool for the job. We have lots of offerings. Our API offerings have never been more robust. We have lots of different options, and they achieve different things. And Nojan and I are very much in lockstep on this vision of trying to create this life cycle and this ability to choose what it is you want to use as a tool based on what it is you're trying to accomplish, and that we have an option for everybody based on what you're trying to do. So my big message over and over is going to be, well, I'm an iRules zealot and I can roll REST zealot and all that kind of stuff. All of these things are really powerful and really useful, and the best thing I think you can do is sit down, logically lay out the problem that you're trying to solve, figure out what it is that you need as deliverables from that, and then that's where you figure out the tool you should be using. And once you figure that out, it becomes a whole lot easier. The world gets a lot simpler once you know, oh, I'm using this tool because it achieves the thing I want. Now it's a matter of just going and finding out how to do it. I always say that in any kind of programming, writing the code is the easy part, right? I mean, writing the code to achieve what you want, if you have the logical steps laid out, it's pretty straightforward. So that's
Defining the problem. Absolutely.
that's my big message.
When you've got the right tool, it makes it easy.
Yeah.
Good deal. Okay, so Nojan, maybe any final words from you?
Yeah, I mean, you got me kind of in a philosophical sort of mode, because I remember when I was a network administrator, a junior folks would come to me and say, you know, should I focus on program? Do I need to know scripting? And it was always like, you don't need it, but you're going to be a better person in your job if you spend some time automating. And that was 15 years ago, right? Now it's not optional.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone needs to be a programmer and you need to go back to school and get a CS degree. And our job is to make it easy for you to automate the lifecycle management of your products. And we're one of your vendors. You've got 40 other vendors in your network and in your system, right? So we have to play well with others. We got to make your job easier. And we need your feedback, right? So let us know how we can. This has been great.
Yeah.
And really start automating because it's not optional anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Applications are kind of ruling the world at
Well,
this
things
point.
are getting more complicated.
Yeah,
Cloud, public, SDN is coming. We didn't even talk about that. I mean, or maybe it's not. I mean, who knows, right? But it's just getting more complex. So let's take the hard stuff, automate it. We'll help you do that.
Yeah, that's a great final thought too. So, well, thanks to the panel members. I really appreciate your time and expertise here. Thanks also to the community out there, Dev Central. Really appreciate you guys. Stay active in the community. Contribute. Try to beat this guy over here, Kevin Stewart. Good luck with that. 10,000 points and growing. So again, thanks for your time today. It's been a great Guru panel, and we'll see you out there in the community.
Yeah, thanks, John.
All right.
Thank you.